I hope we won't have to stay in a barn again, he continued now. It's undignified. That barn was dry, replied Fortune tartly, and it was certainly better than the stable you were living in when we found you. A temporary arrangement, I assure you. I would have been out of there in another day or so. Edmund's voice carried not the slightest hint that he didn't absolutely believe what he was saying. But then, he was an actor by trade. Fortune sighed. The hiring of Edmund Wallach seemed to prove her father's oft-made claim that Henry Patchett was too soft-hearted for his own good. Actually, Fortune's mother had often made the same claim about John Plunkett himself. The enormous man sitting next to Edmund scratched his gray beard and asked, "But how much farther is it?" "Busted Heights, 5 miles, said Aaron, pointing to a wooden sign at the side of the road. "If you would keep your eyes open, you wouldn't have to ask foolish questions, Walter," said Mrs. Watson, their leading lady. She smiled sweetly and adjusted one of the mother-of-pearl combs that held her long red hair in place. "Sorry, Amanda," said Walter, ignoring the fact that he could not possibly have seen the sign from inside the wagon. He scratched his beard again, then lifted his derby and scratched the back of his head as well. Walter made it a point never to argue with Mrs. Watson. He had told Fortune it wasn't worth the effort, since she never listened to a thing anyone said. "What's so important about this town that we had to go 20 miles out of our way to play it anyway?" asked Edmund querulously. Fortune ignored the question. The trip to Busted Heights was something her father had insisted on, but he had not been willing to tell her why, saying only that he had something important to do in the town. "Unfinished business, Fortune. Unfinished business," was all he'd say whenever she asked about it. Now he was gone, and though Fortune didn't know what the business was, she had decided to go through the town anyway. She figured if the business was important enough, it would find her. When they reached the town an hour later, Fortune almost told Aaron to keep rolling. Busted Heights, population 407, was the most dismal spot they had landed in yet. It seemed the farther west they traveled, the more unpleasant the surroundings became. She hoped the trend wouldn't continue indefinitely. As they rattled to a stop, Fortune found herself longing once more for the gracious sophistication of Charleston and the cozy house where she and her parents had lived when they were not traveling with a show. If the other actors felt the same way, they didn't show it. Despite the unpaved streets and gray buildings of Busted Heights, they exploded from the wagon like bees from a toppled hive. "Oh, Lordy, that does feel good," said Mr. Patchett, stretching his long legs. "Today's ride was longer than an amateur production of King Lear." Fortune looked at him fondly. Tall, though not as tall as Walter, slender and beak-nosed, Henry Patchett had been her father's best friend since long before she was born. "Get my bag, Walter," ordered Mrs. Watson. "Certainly, my dear," replied the giant in a mild voice. Fortune frowned. She didn't like the way Mrs. Watson treated Walter, or any of the rest of them for that matter. Ever since the death of Fortune's mother nearly 2 years earlier, Amanda Watson had been trying to take on the role of grand lady for the troupe. "Leave the bag," said Fortune, braving Mrs. Watson's scowl. "We've got a lot to do before dark. Let's get busy." Familiar with the routine, they separated to tackle their jobs. Edmund and Aaron to put up posters announcing the troupe was in town, Mr. Patchett and Walter to find a space to perform in, Mrs. Watson to begin attracting men, which she did with remarkable skill. As leader of the troupe, Fortune was responsible for finding their lodgings. It didn't take her long to locate a likely-looking boarding house, which for their purposes was one that didn't look as if it would charge much money. Tugging her dress slightly askew, Fortune reached up and pulled a wisp of her golden hair out of place. The moves were calculated to add to her waif-like appearance. Sometimes they helped, sometimes not. The fact that she was only 5 feet tall also helped, though most of the time she found her height, or lack thereof, wildly annoying. Taking a deep breath, Fortune marched up